Hello, everybody. Welcome back, everyone. First of all, for this final session of our second Sea Summit, Thinking Tomorrow Today, New Era of Collaboration, I'm very happy to close the event, and I'm very honored as well to have a fire chat with Halla Tómasdóttir. Halla, when we first started to talk, when I was thinking back about it, I was very impressed by your creativity and also impressed by the way you kind of capture a lot of very complex issues in very simple wording. I remember you talking about the chief stakeholder officer, also about the CFO. I thought you were talking about the chief financial officer, but then you kind of corrected me and you said, no, it's the chief future officer. So I thought it was very inspiring and also very catchy. Now, for those who do not know Halla, Halla is the CEO of the B Team, a group of courageous business and civil society leaders working together to transform business for a better world. I'm not going to go back in the whole CV of Halla because that would take too much of our time. But for those who want, they can have a look in the expo where there is a video of the B Team, and you can find a lot about Halla online. So have a look at the movie, and welcome back, Halla, to have this chat. The format is going to be simple. We're going to have a chat for about 15 minutes, and then we open up for questions. So please, people listening in, post your questions because we're going to pick out one or two questions at the end of our talks. Halla, a quick sketch of the context and then I hand over to you. But in our talks prior to this session, I remember we both agreed that there are a lot of challenges, and the challenges are super high. It's the crisis in inequality. It's the globalized power of the market. There's closing the SDG gaps in the next 10 years. And on top, there is this crisis. So it's easy to get overwhelmed and sometimes even paralyzed. So I'd like to structure our conversation around two themes. First of all, how can we move back to hope and action? Jill this morning already mentioned very clearly it's a decade of action. And the second topic is how can this community of corporate social investors and the related company play a role? So let me start with my first question, a question which is very close to your heart, which is leadership. We hear a lot about sustainability, purpose, inclusive capital. You told us we have to be bold and brave and think and act long term. You speak to a lot of CEOs, but what challenges are they facing nowadays to live up to those expectations, Halla?
Yes, good morning, Steven. Great to be here and with all of you this morning. And you are not exaggerating. This may be the most challenging moment anyone in leadership has faced. And when the B Team was founded 7 years ago and set out to confront business as usual, I think a lot of people thought that was really bold. And they have since been leading by brave action. But I think we're now in a moment where most leaders agree that business as usual is no longer an option, but they are perhaps somewhat paralyzed at time and somewhat facing structural barriers to be able to meet this moment with what it calls for. It's a different kind of leadership we need. We need a reset. And we are still working in an economic system that I call the Friedman era, that was set when Milton Friedman set out that the purpose of organizations was to maximize shareholder wealth. And so our whole system of business and the market is set up around that idea. But I think we all know if we want to go from this moment where we're facing a convergence of crisis to a future state where we have shared prosperity on a healthy planet, more inclusive economies and a social contract that holds, we need to change how we lead. We need to change how we do business. And we actually need an economic system that lets us do that. And so I think there are maybe four things that I think a lot about that are sort of the stable blocks of this new kind of leadership that allows us to manage this transition, which is incredibly hard. And first is, how do we redefine the purpose of business to be about all stakeholders? And we may need to think about things like, do we have a stakeholder officer? Is our governance still organized around shareholder primacy in business, but actually needs to be organized around stakeholders? And therefore, do we need to change who is in our boardroom, who we listen to, who we learn from, how we see the problems we're facing needs to change. The second thing we think a lot about is principled leadership. How do you exercise principled leadership to address the challenges that we're facing? And we see three principles needing to be somewhere at the heart of all leaders' behaviors today. Sustainability, because there is no future beyond the planetary boundaries. Equality, because our crisis of inequality is so enormously challenging for all of us, and we have to unleash the creativity of all of our employees, all of our stakeholders in order to solve these challenges. But last but not least, two human qualities that I think we really need to learn to develop in ourselves. And I'm not sure business school teaches us this. And I'm not sure our peers teach us to do this, or our boardroom or investors encourage this. And that is first, courage. We need to really drop from our head to our hearts to find enough courage to do the right things to meet this moment. And second, humility, the other side that is essential to be able to drive an inclusive transition, because no one company, no one country, no one leader can manage the transition from the reality we're in today and the future we need to get to without understanding that we don't have all the answers, but coming together in a radical collaboration with others, we can and will find them. So this is not an era where we go it alone anymore. This is an era where we humbly need to recognize that we don't know it all, that old ways are no longer working, that we need to have the courage to innovate the way we do business, the way we lead, and that needs to be done together with others.
Thank you, Halla. What strikes me many times, and also when we had our chat, is that many of those leaders, they see the dot at the horizon. They feel they have to buy into all of this, but they're locked into the system because they have to deliver next quarter, next year, next 3 years. So as an intro to my next question, being to a certain extent locked into the system, is there a specific role you think the corporate social investors could play as complementary to what business leaders have to live up to?
Absolutely. And I'm actually really happy to be here today because I think your community can play and must play a critical role in this transition, in helping to drive this transition. We have examples on the B team and in our ecosystem of business leaders doing the right things, but they end up either losing their investor support, they are unable to get their board support, and they, in some cases, have lost their jobs, even for driving the right transition, because the economic system is still stuck in the Friedman era, and it hasn't really transitioned into this new era. So I think corporate social investors and philanthropy are critical risk capital to help us fund what I would simply call the shift to new mindsets, the shift to new business models, and the shift to new metrics and measures that need to become normalized as the new definition of success. That, to me, is going to take a lot more collaboration, because I'll tell you, one of the most exhausting things for a CEO or a board director today is that we have thousands of nonprofits and actors asking them to do more because we have great big challenges. And so everybody from the Me Too movement to from the kids and climate strikes to Black Lives Matter, they're asking, you need to do more. And refugees and migrant crisis is facing them. And there's the climate crisis, probably the defining crisis of our time. And we want new measures and metrics and governance models and more transparency. And all of these asks are quite complex. It's a jungle or an alphabet soup, business leaders often say. So what we need funding for now, and what is really needed, what needs risk capital, is to fund the holistic and systemic thinking that is needed to innovate and try to push the system to support the kind of leadership that I know we as human beings all want to do, because we all want to do right by the next generation.
Yeah.
And quick 3 shifts, if I may, Steven, 3 shifts.
Sure.
We need to shift from short-term to long-term. The market is stuck in the quarterly. We need to go to quarter-century mindset. And I think engaging with the next generation is critical to that. We need to shift our definition of success from being financial profit only to being the global goals, or ESG, or at least holistic. And 3, and I think gender and diversity around the boardroom table and in leadership is critical to helping us expand that definition. And last, we need to shift from shareholder primacy to stakeholder governance as the new model and purpose of business.
Yeah. And could you share, Halla, some of your experience? Because we've been talking over the last couple of days about potentially in our dreams, corporate social investors could be the golden nudge. Somebody called it the Trojan horse within the company to kind of change it from within. But reality also tells us that it's David and Goliath. There is the big machine and there is the big money and there is the big shorter term goals that have to be realized. Do you have experience how to get a listening ear from the corporate side, which is again on its path, and even maybe realizing that they should go somewhere, but how that golden nudge could be applied? Could you share some experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting how we see the acceleration of progress on this front. Take one of our B team companies, Danone. Their CEO, Emmanuel Faber, is quite an unusual leader. And during the global pandemic, he moved up the goal for Danone to become a B corporation, basically certifying himself to do the kind of transparent stakeholder governance that needs to happen. And one of the reasons Emmanuel is bold and brave like that is not just who he is. It is because he chooses to have partnerships with people who are thinking differently. So on a trip with Mohammed Yunus, who is at the forefront of social business, he really was transformed. And he will tell you that story, that when he saw the consequence of how he does business on the supply chains in India, he was personally transformed and started a transformative journey for his company. You can say similarly, his main competitor, Hamdi Ulukaya, founder of Chobani, is a Turkish immigrant, and because he understands it on his own skin, because he's different from many others, he hires 30% of his employees from the population of immigrants, refugees, and migrants, and has built an amazing business doing that. So I think, to be honest, the most powerful examples I'm seeing is business leaders who come together with those who are taking the risk, putting their own resources, financial and otherwise, to doing business differently, coming together in radical collaboration between unlikely allies. That is the most transformative force out there. Yesterday, we said in a meeting, there's a vaccine hopefully coming for COVID, and we can maybe fix our global pandemic with a vaccine. But there is no vaccine for climate change except radical collaboration. That is the vaccine we need to apply to these global challenges. And that is, we need to recognize the interdependence between our economies, between people and our planet. And we need to recognize the fact that we need to invest in justice. And that means we need to see the injustices that we have built over the last decades in the way we do business. So getting out of the CEO suite, getting different people into the boardroom, becoming more gender balanced, racially and diverse, speaking more to the next generation, all of these are ways to help transform our leadership and our ways of doing business.
Thank you, Halla. For the audience, so you can post some of your questions. But I'll continue on this path a bit with you, Halla, because what you say, in fact, is if you could identify the honest and genuine relations that corporates have with outsiders of the system, where the corporate social investor could be a bridge to build these partnerships with the non-usual suspects, so to speak, counting them, identifying them, and taking them real and bringing them in your business seems to be a good metric and a good kind of assessment to what extent corporates are genuine and real about their change?
I think so. And I basically would love to call on all of you here to think about how you can move beyond funding and investing in single issue solutions, because our issues are interdependent. Our challenges are intersectional, so we need more holistic thinking. And that is both about bringing people, planet, and economic issues more powerfully together and understanding their intersections. But it's also about bringing the multiple stakeholders more together in a conversation about this. I don't think we can reset our leadership, our businesses, our economy without radical collaboration, without deep dialogue. We live in a really divided world where few people trust anyone. And I think businesses' social license depends upon the ability to engage with much more diverse set of stakeholders than we've done until now. Yeah. And so this is not just an opportunity, it is the biggest opportunity of our lifetimes. Yeah. But it is also risky not to do it.
It's risky, absolutely, as you say. And there is an interesting question from Frederick Leroy in the chat box, which is also for myself, one of the big, challenges where we have to kind of recombine long-term and short-term. And what Frederick is putting forward is Danone has announced a massive reorganization as a consequence of the crisis. And they're even acting in the food system. So the food system is affected, but not to big extent. There are other sectors which are affected even worse. So on the short term, they have to reorganize. They might have to lay off people. How does that sit together with this long-term perception of, we heard this morning, Gilles, a lot of youth are unemployed and employment is an important element. This long-term, short-term dichotomy, how do we handle that?
Yeah, that's one of the greatest, that's a great question. It's one of the greatest challenges of our times. In Danone's case, it was remarkable that 99% of investors supported their suggestion to go to full or move up their B certification. So they had the support of investors for that decision. But when then push comes to shove, the economic system continues to demand quarterly results according to a very narrow definition of success. And the reality is, and let's just be frank, that there are people who have lost their jobs for doing the right things in the energy sector for a transition. So I don't think there are easy answers for this. But I do think, I think all of us have a role. And I think the reason we have come together, the B team, with many others in something called Imperative 21, and you can see the video that's been shared about that, a very quick video, is because we actually think that this is not only about shifting our own leadership, it is about shifting policies so that policies in the world will be more unified and supportive of purpose-driven and principled leadership and business doing, and policies about the market will start asking more thoroughly for long-term plans. And it's also about shifting norms in our culture, because we have norm shifting and mindset shifting that needs to happen. And if you think about, for example, this week, NASDAQ, for the first time in its history, said they want to delist companies if they don't have at least one woman and one representative of what they categorize as proper diversity. So pressure is coming even from mainstream actors, but we're in this reality of being stuck in the old system, knowing very well we need to go to this new system. And I think your role in it is to help fund and give support to all of those who are working to shift the system, because that needs to be done together. That's not something that one organization or one corporate funder can do. So you can help create, I would call it almost like the pilot space for the new ways of working. And if you do that, I think leaders everywhere are now so ready to do the right thing, but they're stuck in the crisis of conformity in a broken system. And so help us create that new reality is my call to action to all of you. And it will be hard to manage this tension, but we have to do this. There is no other option. Business as usual on a quarterly basis for financial profit alone has left us on a burning planet with a broken social contract. This is not a reality any of us want to continue to live in.
Yeah. Halla, thanks very much. I noted down 4 rather concrete elements, I would say, which maybe our audience can take away. I think what you said is we have to make sure that we redefine purpose, but also metrics and KPIs and how we define success. So we should help our corporates in creating that perspective. I think you also said we have to change the mindset, both on our own end and on the corporate end. Also, what I think is refreshing is just start counting the unusual partnerships our corporate has and whether they generally kind of engage with those people out there that they normally do not work with. And another last element is invest in systemic and transformative change, not only in topical shorter term social issues. Halla, thanks very much for this overall vision. I think it concluded very well our 2-day activities, and it gave us some ideas in the years to come where to work and what to do. Thanks so much. I hand now over to Max and Roberta for the final closure, and thanks again, and see you later.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steven and Halla, for this very inspirational closing discussion. I think that left us with a lot of food for thought. And I would like to invite all of you to use the chat that is related to the stage and just put in what is your one key takeaway from the C Summit, while Roberta and I will close the session for you. Roberta, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Max. And while you all reflect on what has been very interesting couple of days, I wanted to share my reflection. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for the trust that you have given Daphne and EVPA for the last 2 days. I can only share the sentiment that Kirsten shared this morning in terms of this is a unique platform to come together where corporate social investors don't have to explain what they do or why they do it. And even if meeting online is not going to be the same as meeting in person, I feel like it would have been a missed opportunity to skip this year's event that has been rich of a lot of insight and learning for all of us. And I think is also I wanted to also share another reflection. We have discussed a lot on the how, on different models to accelerate and amplify impact. And yesterday, Steven very positively and kind of optimistically said that now it's not about the why, but is how do we do it. And I would say among our community, for sure, there is no need to talk about why. But as we heard today, as we heard from Halla, as we heard from many of the conversation, there is still a big need to help shifting the mindset of C-suite executive and shifting the system, right? And it's amazing the potential that can be unlocked when all stakeholders come together aligned around purpose. I really love the progression that the Schneider Electric, the Gilles this morning showed, moving from stakeholder values maximization. I think that the Friedman era that Halla referred to shareholder value, to system value for common good. I think we as corporate social investor, as a community, like-minded community, have an incredible opportunity to, on one side, nudge. I think we've heard a lot this word, and kind of show the way, inspire, but also I think to become an ally of enlightened leaders to help embark on this journey. I also heard a wonderful sentence from Halla, radical collaboration. And I know that Max also shared the excitement. I think we cannot do it on our own. This has been the leitmotif of the last 2 events that EVPA has convened. And I'm sure that we can all learn more about how to build trust, how to continue rebuilding the system in a way that looks forward rather than back. We discussed this morning about we don't want to use build back better. because it would mean going back. I think there is no going back, is looking forward. And how can we avoid that we rebuild in the way that it was tackled in 2008 with merely governance fixes rather than value shift? So we need to shoot for the star. We need to really help the system shift around a new set of value. And kind of I'm looking forward to continue working together with you and engaging in more conversation on how can we do it as a community? How can we accelerate this journey? How can we instigate and inspire new ways of working into the mainstream, make our voice bigger? Max, over to you for some observation and remarks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm happy to build on what you just said, and totally agree, obviously, that collaboration is the name of the game. At the same time, I understood even better during the C Summit that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for that. What I learned is that it requires a shared understanding of the vision and the objectives of the collaboration, that it is also about trusted relationships that you need to create between the players, including sharing failures, and also a strong anchor of the collaboration approach at the highest level of the governance structure in all organizations participating. This seems to be key, and that has been repeated several times throughout the C Summit. From the Daphne perspective, I can state that this is our overall ambition to support collaboration and equipping members and the ecosystem with the right formats to meet and build trusted relationships, but then also with the right tools to make collaboration work. And last, but definitely not least, by making knowledge and experience accessible across the issue communities. And I think this is really one of the key elements that we live up to between EVPA and Daphne, and that is also shown in the C Summit approach, to bring the different people with different backgrounds and experience together in order to achieve more together. So I'm really looking forward to build on this and to continue for the benefit of all of you.
Thank you. Thanks, Max. I think it's my honor and privilege, therefore, to wrap up this C Summit this year. I want to say a big thank you to both the EVPA and Daphne teams that have done a monumental effort to pull it all together, to organize and to orchestrate this wonderful session. And of course, to our sponsors and supporters, and to all of you, because this would not be possible without all of you coming together and being so open to share and to reflect along the way. I really looking forward to 2021, where we can go back to meeting also in person, to continue sharing, going even deeper, and changing the world. I mean, as we said this morning, let's dream together. Let's dream for a world where GDP is not the only measure of success, where shareholders' value is not the only value to optimize in managing business, and look forward to building a better world together. Thank you very much, and enjoy your Friday and your weekend.
Bye.
Bye.